There's only one reason most people never become disciplined, and it has nothing to do with motivation, nothing to do with talent, nothing to do with willpower. They never decide who they're willing to disappoint, because discipline is not a habit problem. It's a people problem. Discipline isn't built when life is calm, flexible, and forgiving. It's built the moment you choose standards over comfort and accept that not everyone will like the version of you that follows. The disciplined version of you wakes up earlier, says no more often, stops explaining, stops participating in weakness, and that version makes people uncomfortable. So most people hesitate. They hesitate not because they can't do the work, but because they don't want to deal with the friction that comes with it. They want discipline without resistance, structure that doesn't offend their habits, consistency that doesn't interrupt their lifestyle, standards that don't expose how lazy they've become. They want discipline that fits neatly inside their comfort. But discipline doesn't negotiate. It doesn't adapt to your mood. It doesn't care about your past. It doesn't soften itself to protect your ego. The moment you try to live disciplined, life pushes back. Your body resists unfamiliar effort. Your mind looks for excuses. Your environment becomes hostile to your standards. Friends question you. Family doubts you. Old habits fight to survive. And this is where most people quit. Not because discipline is impossible, not because it's unrealistic, but because it demands a level of honesty they've spent years avoiding. Discipline forces you to see who you really are, without stories, without excuses, without comfort. And that leads to the real question most people never answer. Are you avoiding discipline because it's hard, or because you're not ready to disappoint the version of yourself that's been comfortable for too long? Once you realize discipline requires disappointing comfort, the next truth becomes unavoidable. Most people say they want discipline, but what they really want is control without sacrifice. They want the outcomes of discipline without touching the behaviors that make them uncomfortable. So they protect comfort like it's survival. Sleep without boundaries, food without restraint, dopamine on demand, endless distractions to avoid silence. Anything that makes them feel good right now gets defended aggressively. And discipline threatens all of it. The moment you set a real standard, comfort stops being guaranteed. Wake up early? That threatens sleep comfort. Train consistently? That threatens physical ease. Work daily without motivation? That threatens emotional comfort. So, instead of adjusting their comfort, most people adjust their standards. They lower them. They call it balance. They call it realism. They call it being kind to themselves. But kindness that avoids effort is just disguised self-sabotage. What they're really doing is building a life where discipline never has room to grow. Because discipline and comfort cannot coexist at the same level. One has to lose. You cannot build discipline while protecting the very habits that are killing it. And that leads to the uncomfortable question most people refuse to answer. Are you lowering your standards to protect your comfort? Or are you finally ready to sacrifice comfort to build the discipline you keep saying you want? Once comfort is no longer protected, another weakness surfaces. Discipline doesn't fail because it's hard. It fails because it's repetitive. Same wake-up time, same training, same work, same restraint, day after day. No applause, no excitement, no visible progress at first. And this is where most people start to crack, because they weren't trained to endure boredom. They were trained to chase stimulation. They need novelty to stay engaged. They need emotion to feel productive. They need chaos to feel alive. Discipline removes all of that. It strips life down to effort and execution. No adrenaline to hide behind. No motivation surge to blame. No dramatic struggle to post about. Just consistency. And consistency feels suffocating to people addicted to constant stimulation. That's why most people quit right here. Not because they're incapable, not because the work is too hard,
but because silence exposes them. Discipline requires boredom tolerance, and boredom exposes weakness faster than pain ever will. When there's nothing exciting left to distract you, no crisis to justify inconsistency, no emotion to blame for quitting, you're forced to face a brutal question. Can you respect yourself when the work feels dull, quiet, and unrewarding? Or do you only show up when it feels exciting? When boredom strips away distraction, discipline goes even deeper. Here's what no one tells you. Discipline doesn't attack your schedule first. It attacks your identity. Before it changes what you do, it challenges who you think you are. It forces questions you've been avoiding for years. Who are you without excuses? Who are you without comfort? Who are you without external validation? For most people, those questions are terrifying, because discipline removes the stories they've been using to protect their ego. I'm just tired lately. I work better under pressure. I'll lock in when the time is right. Discipline exposes the truth behind all of them. You do what you do because it's easy, not because it's necessary. And once that illusion breaks, you can't unsee it. You start noticing patterns, how often you delay, how quickly you negotiate with yourself, how easily you quit when no one is watching. That's why people don't resist discipline physically. They resist it emotionally, because it threatens the version of themselves they've been protecting for years, the version that believes they're capable as long as they're never forced to prove it. And once discipline cracks that identity, another problem shows up that most people aren't ready for. What happens when discipline starts changing you and the people around you don't recognize the new version anymore? Once discipline starts changing who you are, your environment becomes the next enemy. Most people try to build discipline while staying in environments that reward weakness. Friends who normalize excuses, spaces designed for distraction, routines built around comfort, and then they wonder why discipline never sticks. Discipline requires friction, distance from temptation, separation from weak standards. You cannot live undisciplined all day and expect discipline to magically appear for 1 hour. That's why disciplined people often feel alone, not because they think they're better, but because they've removed themselves from environments that make discipline impossible. They stop bonding over laziness. They stop validating bad habits. They stop participating in shared weakness. And people feel that absence, so they question it, they mock it, they downplay it. Not because discipline is wrong, but because your discipline exposes their avoidance. Weak environments create weak behavior. Strong standards require strong boundaries. And most people refuse to change their environment because it would require uncomfortable separation, which leads to a dangerous question most people avoid. Are you actually lacking discipline, or are you surrounded by people and systems that make discipline impossible to sustain? Once your environment stops supporting excuses, another illusion collapses: motivation. Motivation is the most overrated tool people rely on. It feels good. It feels powerful. It feels like progress, but it isn't progress. Discipline is structural. Motivation is emotional. Motivation shows up when conditions are perfect, when energy is high, when the idea feels exciting, when the outcome feels close. Discipline functions when none of that exists. That's why people stay inconsistent. They wait to feel disciplined instead of acting disciplined. They wait for energy. They wait for clarity. They wait for the right moment. And discipline never gets built that way, because discipline isn't born from emotion. It's built through action without permission, showing up without motivation, executing without excitement, repeating without reassurance. Most people never cross that line, not because they can't, but because crossing it means admitting something uncomfortable, that they don't lack motivation, they lack standards.
And that raises the next unavoidable question. If motivation keeps failing you, what happens when you finally stop waiting for it and hold yourself to a standard that doesn't care how you feel? When standards are never enforced, there's a consequence most people don't notice until it's too late. Avoided discipline doesn't disappear. It transforms into regret. Quiet regret. Private regret. The kind no one sees and no one talks about. It shows up in comparison, watching others pass you, seeing younger versions outperform you, realizing time is moving and you're not. It shows up late at night, when distractions are gone, when excuses stop working, when you're alone with your thoughts. You don't collapse all at once, you decay slowly. And that's the most dangerous outcome, because there's no alarm, no crisis, no dramatic failure to wake you up, just the slow realization that you've been avoiding the work for years. And once that realization sets in, another question becomes impossible to ignore. How long can you live with the pain of knowing that your life didn't fall apart? You simply chose comfort over discipline, one day at a time. Here's the truth. Everyone pays a price, either the price of discipline or the price of regret. One hurts early, one hurts forever. Discipline isn't built by feeling ready. It isn't built when conditions are perfect. It isn't built when life is calm. It's built by choosing standards when it's uncomfortable, inconvenient, and lonely, when no one's watching, when no one's encouraging you, when there's no immediate reward. So if you're wondering why discipline hasn't stuck yet, don't ask what you're missing. Ask what you're still protecting. What comfort are you refusing to let go of? What excuse do you keep defending? What habit are you afraid to lose because it feels familiar? Because discipline doesn't fail randomly. It fails where comfort is protected. And before you leave, if any part of this exposed something you've been avoiding, don't ignore it. Put it in the comments. What's the one comfort you know is holding you back? Not for approval, not for validation, for accountability. And if you want more of this, not hype, not motivation, but real pressure that forces change, stay here. Share this with someone who keeps making excuses. And subscribe, not because it feels good, but because you're done living undisciplined. This isn't for everyone, but if you're still listening, you already know why.